Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to House on SAP Dev with me, DJ Kumacro, back for another Friday, and we're going to finish off OAuth 2. So it's been this is the third of 3 episodes we're going to do. Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining. So what did we do? We looked at OAuth 2 in general. I think we looked at the password, user owner password credentials grant type in the first episode. Then last week we looked at the client credentials grant type or flow. We also looked at refresh tokens and refreshing tokens. Good morning, Mark. Oh, good morning to a snowy Kiel. Excellent. Excellent. It was snowing here yesterday, but it's got a little bit warmer today. It's about 3 degrees now. So is it 3 degrees? What's going on? Oh, actually, no, it's not. It's not 3 degrees. It's -1 degree. Okay. Well, anyway. So yeah, welcome and good morning. We're going to wrap up this little mini series by looking at the authorization code grant type. I think we didn't have time last week to look at it, which was good really, because I think it's going to take up most of this particular episode. I'm just going to go through it slowly and just enjoy it as usual. I got my coffee. I've already had my chocolate and I swallowed it incorrectly, and it's sort of half stuck in my throat now, so if I cough, that's why. So good morning, Ulrich. Good morning to Frankfurt, and Lewis, good morning. It is a pleasure to have you here. It is a pleasure. So I've put the link to this week's SAP Developer News, brought to you by the Developer Advocates, in the chat. So take a look at that. Oh, and AP, sorry, I missed you, AP. Good morning. Good morning, AP. Good morning. So let me switch to the main scene, because this is there's our friend Riley, who's talking about the Developer Insight Survey, this year's Developer Insight Survey. So there's a link in the description of the video here, as you can see. Show more, blah blah blah. You can click on the Developer Insight Survey, and please, if you haven't done already, please fill it out and let us go. Ooh, Dreadman7, good morning from Las Palmas. Wow, are you on holiday? Do you live there? Las Palmas, very nice. Yes, I'm feeling as though I need a bit of winter sun. So maybe we'll do the live stream from your place next week. So Eric, good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. So so there's the developer news. I've got my coffee. What else do I need to do? My brain's not working today, as usual. Let me close that. Oh yeah, here we go. And good morning to India, Azad. Azad India, I'll just call you Azad, yeah, that's okay. There we go. So, yeah, let's get started. So, the authorization code grant type. Let's just take a minute or so to sort of land ourselves sort of, gently into what that even is, and how it relates to the things we've looked at, and then we'll start looking at it. So Louise says, DJ, take a small spoonful of honey for your throat. I will, actually. That's good. In fact, I might have that with a cup of tea afterwards. Thank you. Yes. Good morning, Wizards. Good morning and welcome. Good morning and welcome. So I'm looking forward to this. So, we're on the main scene, aren't we? Yes. So you can see the screen here. This is this. Let me put that in there, because you might not have that already. Let me stick that in there. There, excellent. Okay, so that is where I'm at. That's the page I'm at. Just to let you know, this is an archive. I archived this repository because it was this sort of half code jam thing, half virtual event in the midst of lockdown and everything. And maybe we'll do this as a code jam in the future. I don't know, but anyway, it's archived for now. But the stuff that I wrote here, I find myself going back to it time and time again. This diagram is not anything I've created. It's actually from section 1.2 of the RFC. Okay, this is the RFC for the OAuth 2.0 authorization framework, right? So this is the diagram I've taken from there. And when we talk about grant types, we talk about, you can also talk about flows. And flow is maybe a more meaningful word, because it's how the dance, how the question and answer back and forth goes between the client and the various other actors, let's call them, in this whole sort of authorization concept. And it's mostly super interesting when we're talking about the authorization code grant type. There are different grant types. We've already looked at the resource owner password credentials grant type. That was in the first episode of this mini-series 2 weeks ago. Last week we looked at the client credentials grant type. This implicit one, I've never used it, never looked at it. It's basically for browser-based stuff. And we don't use it in APIs. You can see how old this is. It even says SAP Cloud Platform instead of what's it called, Business Technology Platform these days. So yeah, but anyway, forget the implicit one. Well, I forget. I don't think about it. The most common from a consuming APIs on SAP BTP perspective is probably going to be halfway between the client credentials and the resource owner password credentials, otherwise known as password. And we've looked at both of those, and both of those really don't have a human involved. Yes, there's a human involved in terms of this resource owner password credentials, in that the human, i.e. me, has to give the client, as in the program, my credentials, my user ID and password, so the program, can use those to request a token, right? So that's quite extreme, and you have to have a big trust. Big trust? Is that even a phrase? You have to have a strong trust between the human owner of the resource and the program that is going to be consuming that resource, sort of on behalf of, well, actually, no, not on behalf of, consuming that resource. Huge trust, okay? More specifically, when the resource owner, me, trusts the client, that script that we wrote in the first week, so much that they are willing to give their username and password credentials to the client, okay? Excuse me, that made me cough. Client credentials, on the other hand, is where there's not really a human at all, okay? The program itself, the script that we wrote, good morning, Nico, good morning. The script that we wrote last week, where we use the client credentials grant type, or client credentials flow, there's no human involved, i.e. the client was acting on its own behalf. The program, the script that we wrote that did things, I can't even remember, what was it? Oh, it was to do with the event mesh APIs, wasn't it? Right? So yeah, you have these, some people call them technical users, service users, autonomous pieces of software that have their own credentials, client credentials, right? So there's no human involved. And the client therefore says, here's my client ID, here's my client secret, please give me an access token with which I can then, make calls, authenticate my calls. Today, we're going to be looking at the authorization code, where there is very much a human involved, as in me or you, and the human is involved to a greater degree than where the human was involved in the resource owner password credentials. In that, week 1 of this little mini-series, in that context, in that grant type, in that flow, the human, me, just plugged in my user ID and password into the program, gave the program my user ID and password, and that was it. Simple, but extreme. The authorization code normally involves a request initiated by the client, as in by the program, to a human resource owner, me, asking me to grant access, right? So already we've got an extra step already. First of all, instead of the program, the script, going directly to the authorization server and saying, I've got something here, please give me a token, in order to get that something here in the authorization code grant type or flow, the client must ask the human, and the human must give explicitly their permission to say yes or no. Okay, so if the access request is approved, if the human says, yeah, okay, I authorize this program, whatever, here are the, and I've been told that, I can see that the program is requesting read access, write access, whatever. Yes, okay. Then what the client, the program, gets in response to that is not an access token, it's a code, a short-lived code with which an access token can then be requested. So, please, dear human, can you authorize me to have access to these resources that you own? Yes, says the human. And then the authorization server, having seen the human say yes, says, here's a code, dear program. And then the program says, okay, I've got this code. Please, can I have can I exchange that code for an access token? Note that at no time in this flow does the client see or use the resource owner's password credentials. So Luis said, good morning, Nico. Many thanks for your content. Yes, Nico is doing some awesome work on the UI5, sharing UI5 knowledge, and also CAP, of course, but mostly UI5 at the moment. So Nico, why don't you stick your latest 2 minutes of video URL in the chat for people to consume. Now, so Mark says, I use OAuth for ages, but I think I will never understand all the details of it. Mark, I'm with you. Or I was with you. I thought, oh my goodness, it's so complicated. Oh my goodness me. But actually, going through it slowly helped me understand. And the authorization code is probably the most complex one that I've come across. So given that, and given what Mark's just said, and I completely get where folks are coming from if they're thinking the same thing, I was there. So I just took some time to, not that I'm saying you haven't taken the time, but I thought, right, okay, I need to figure this out. So let's just dwell on this diagram for a second. The client is the program, the script. It makes an authorization request to the resource owner. That's where the resource owner is given a web page to say yes or no. So if you've used GitHub or Google or any sort of web-based thing like that, or please can I have access to this, to Twitter or whatever, maybe the Twitter one is a moot point anyway, and said, oh yes, I grant this program access. That's what's going on here. That's the authorization code grant type in action. So the resource owner hopefully says yes. That yes basically means then that the client is given this code, this authorization code, that it then uses to say, please, can I have, to the authorization server, an access token? Here's my code, okay? And the authorization server then says, okay, yeah, fine, because it's validated that code, gives the client an access token, and then the client can happily and merrily use access token to authenticate actual requests to, consume, read or write the resources that belong to the resource owner, right? Okay. So far, so good. Are there any questions before we carry on? That was a lot of words, and normally I don't like, this is hands-on, not just reading documentation, but I think it was important to sort of, for all of us to land on the same page. So what I'm going to use, just for the heck of it, but also because it was easier to use this, and it makes it's a little bit easier to understand, and there are very few actually sort of APIs on BTP that are protected with the authorization code grant type, because there are not really any humans involved. It's a very technical back-end system. However, if you're consuming an API, then you need to know about the authorization code grant type. And also, if you're building an API and you want humans involved as well, or if you're building an application, then you need to understand how this works. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to suggest we look at the Strava API, partly because, why not? Partly because it's nicely documented and there's a nice diagram, and partly because I've been messing around with this a couple of years ago, and I found a script that we can use. Okay, so the Strava API. By the way, if you don't know what Strava is, it's a website for people sharing their. There's Robin and Ian and Mark. They're sharing their activities. Running, walking, swimming, hiking, and so on. Right. And that's, there are activities. Okay, that's what Strava is. And if we have a look in the Getting Started guide, We can see that there's an API getting started. I'm not going to read all the way through this. You have to define an application, okay? And it's the same, it's a similar sort of thing. You say, you know, in order for an application, for a client to exist in its own right, that existence is in the form of a client ID. Recognize that phrase? And a client secret. Okay, so the client itself, the program itself, has a client ID and a client secret. Okay, and in a similar sort of way, generating the existence of that, when we looked at client credentials and password grant types on BTP, that was effectively, you know, calling that client ID into existence was creating a binding, creating a service key from the instance of the service that looked after the thing we wanted to interact with at an API level. So here there's a web page in my Strava API dashboard. Here's a screenshot of one of them, my API application, where you just create, you know, we create an API, create a program, call it charity. I think mine's called test. In fact, Strava API. Where's my Strava API? There we go. Let's go here. API, create and manage your app. I've created an app. So there's mine, and it's just called, I don't even know what it's called, test or something, right? Was it called physical activity? I've no idea, right? It's just a test app. Oh, edit. Let's have a look. Test, right? Test. We'll look at the details of here in a minute. So, AP has a question. Oh, by the way, I can't share links with this account, unfortunately. Oh, but a quick search of 2 minutes of SAP UI5. Oh, in fact, let's do that now. 2 minutes of SAP UI5. Oh, yes, there we go. 2 minutes of SAP UI5 playlist. There we go. Brilliant. Thank you, Nico. I didn't realize you didn't post there. There we go. There is the playlist. So, AP has a question. So while using the resource owner password credentials grant type, we had to pass client ID and client secret also to authenticate. Isn't it superfluous? Why is it required to pass client ID and client secret too? That's a really good question. Effectively because we want to be able to revoke access tokens, and the revoking of access tokens is in relation to the client, not in relation to the human resource owner. Okay, that's one part of the answer to that question. But also, there are two actors in that scenario. There's the human actor and there's the program actor, and they both have to have their separate identities. If that makes sense. So when the client ID, if you remember the resource owner, password grant type flow, you effectively authenticated that request for an access token with the client secret and the client ID. Okay, so the client is acting on its own behalf, but it has to give as data. Remember that data URL encoded. It has to pass that data in the form, you know, as part of the request. And by the way, I'm validating my my request by here's the resource owner's user ID and password. There you go. So it's acting on its own behalf. Matthias, good morning. Good morning. So I hope that answers the question a little bit, AP. Good question, by the way. So I've got my client ID, got my client secret, got my client here. Now, here we go. Let's just go through here. There's a diagram somewhere. Here we go. Let's go through this diagram. Let's make it a little bit smaller, and then we'll do it. Okay, we'll do it. It's 8:20. That's perfect. We've got enough time. So, can you all see this, by the way? I'm trying to get the whole thing on the page. Let me know if you can see it. So an athlete clicks to log into your app. Okay, there's so much to unpack even in that. Remember, this is the authorization code grant type, and there are at least three. This is like a three-legged OAuth context. The athlete, okay, is the human, the resource owner. Your app is the client. So in fact, why don't we have, where was it? There. Why don't we have that? Oh, hold on. What's going on? Do I need to restart that thing? What's going on? Restart. Relaunch Amethyst. There we go. Fine. Okay. So let's just do that. Put that there. So here we go. Just above my head. So the athlete is the resource owner, and your app is the client. Okay. So the athlete, step 2, the athlete is redirected to the OAuth page. This is why I was thinking that the Strava API is a really nice one, because, you know, it's just real things, you know, athletes, activities, little third-party programs that do things with those activities, okay? So the athlete is redirected to the OAuth page, okay? So that's this thing here. You know, this is this part of the flow. Such and such thing. Let me open that image in you. Is that there we go. Ah, okay. Oh, there we go. That's better. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, make that a little bit bigger. So the athlete is redirected to a page that is a Strava page, but the athlete needs to be logged on to Strava, so Strava knows who the athlete is. The athlete is asked something, some client is requesting access to, and we'll see this little screenshot in for real in a minute, is requesting access at this level, this scope. We talked about scopes before, right? Read scope, write scope, whatever. Okay, we looked at scopes when we were looking at the password grant and the client credentials grant on BTP, weren't we? Didn't we? So this is saying here, there's a program here called Bodhi the dog, no idea, just an example. It would like some scope access, read access, write access. I can't really read that writing there. Do you give it access? Do you grant? Do you say yes? And, you know, in the golden path, the athlete, the human says yes. Okay. Now, if the athlete doesn't say yes, then of course, you know, you're at a dead end. Let's assume the athlete says yes. Oh, Strava. Hello, Robert. Good morning. I thought you might like that. Yes. So we're using the Strava API to demonstrate the authorization code flow. Okay. So the athlete says, yes, I authorize it. So the human says yes. The resource owner says yes. Okay. Clicks authorize. Now, what happens is that somehow that yes needs to be transmitted back to the program, right? To the originating piece of software, this third-party piece of software, your app, right? Remember, this diagram here is intended for folks like you and me who might write a third-party app to interact with the Strava data. So your app as in, you know, the program. So somehow this authorization code, okay, that's why it's called the authorization code grant type, because the result of a positive authorization from the human results in a little code that gets sent back to the program, to the client, so that the client can then use it to request an access token. So how does this code get transmitted back to the program? Okay, it gets transmitted back to the program via HTTP. Okay, so there's a callback from Strava back to your program. Okay, so this works very well, for example, you know, for web-based applications, but you can use the authorization code for sort of, you know, for proprietary, you know, Android-based iOS apps as well, but that's another story. So the athlete clicks authorize, the athlete is redirected to your URL, your app's URL. Okay, and the redirection is an HTTP request to a URL on your app, and that HTTP request has in a query string the authorization code. Okay, and other things as well. In fact, it should also, it's recommended, the authorization OAuth spec recommends or demands, I can't remember, that the scopes that the user said yes to, which hopefully is all of them, are also included in the query string. So basically, your app gets an HTTP request saying yes, the human has said yes, and here's the authorization code, and here are the scopes to which this user has said yes. Okay, so you get the authorization code and the scope. Okay, if you don't get the scopes you wanted, then, you know, you're in bother. But then, assuming you say, okay, well, these are the scopes that I wanted and I need, so I'll now go and make an authorization a grant request to say, please give me an access token, we make that request for an access token. And then, we're into the same part of the flow that we've seen before with the client credentials and the password grant, as in we get an access token back, and we get an expires in information, as in when the access token expires. And also, like the password grant, but unlike the client credentials grant type, we get a refresh token. Okay. Yes, exactly. So this is a really good diagram, which again, like I say, I pinched from the RFC, the OAuth 2.0 RFC. Now, and then we get the refresh token, the access token expiration date. Now, finally, we can make an API call using the access token to authenticate the request. So that's the theory. Let's do something in practice, okay? First of all, we had a look at this briefly. Let's just bring that Strava API across here, Strava developers, I leave that there, put that there. If I look at my API application, okay, I did, when I was looking for the name of my application, test, super inventive. The only really important thing in the application is the authorization callback domain. Now, what the heck is that? That is me as the application developer telling Strava to expect to be asked to send the authorization code in this thing here. Where is it? In this redirected to URL bit here from 4a to 5. That is the callback domain. So the HTTP request is made to a URL where the host name is, in my case, localhost, and the port is 8000. Now, of course, that's purely for testing, purely for demonstration purposes. So Lewis says, great graph, there are 3 levels of confirmation, one for user, one for the server, and the end for resource. Why is it the reason behind this architecture? What is the reason? I'm going to interpret your question as what is the meaning for this architecture? What is the purpose of this architecture? It's so that effectively one of the things that OAuth came along to solve was the problem that before OAuth 2 came along, if you wanted to give access to something, a program, if you wanted to give a program access to the resources that you owned, that ownership was normally through a user ID and password or some other similar credentials. So what you had to do was to give that program your credentials, so the program would act on your behalf. But as it had full access. There's a brilliant, I think where is it? I think I've referred to it here. Yes, there we go. Ryan Boyd, a very old friend of mine, distant friend. He wrote a book, Getting Started with OAuth 2, really good book. And he talked about this story in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, a really good film from the 80s, I think. And effectively, it was all about a parking valet in the US. You come in with a really expensive car, and you want the parking person to go and park your car while you go into the party. You have to give the keys to the car, right? And then the parking person took the car with the keys, with the user ID and password, and went on a wild, maybe crashed the car, I can't remember, right? So it had full access to the car, right? You don't want that. You want to be able to give them only specific access, and you want to be able to revoke that access as well at any point without messing up your own credentials, without messing up your own access. So having this split architecture, having the distinction between the resource owner, an authorization server which handles all this stuff, and the resource server itself, and these dances, these different grant types, these different flows, allows for a more granular and a more controlled way to grant and then revoke access from a program that's acting on your behalf. Does that make sense? Mark Teichmann, yes, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, one of my all-time favourite movies. Yes, brilliant. Does that answer your question, Lewis? it's a very good question as well. You know, why OAuth in the first place? It's basically to avoid the traditional problem of, if you want to give a program access to your stuff, you don't want to give it your user ID and password, because in order to revoke access to that program that you might have given to other programs as well, but that program is behaving in a bad way, the only way you can stop it doing anything is to change your password. But that messes up all the other programs that have got your user ID and password. Not good. Yeah. Okay, cool. So where were we? There's the diagram, there's the Strava. Oh yes, so this thing here, this arrow here, right? The reason, you know, this is not everywhere, but you know, most applications, most resource providers, most things like Strava or whatever, will say, just for security purposes, you need to tell me what the redirect URL hostname and maybe port as well is going to be, so that if the original request in this part here is asking for a redirect to somewhere else, maybe it's like a man-in-the-middle attack type thing, then it won't send the authorization code. Okay, so it's an extra layer of protection. So I've said I'm going to send it back to localhost. Now we've got a client ID, we've got a client secret. Okay, we need those. We've also got an access token and refresh token if we're doing some manual API testing, but you know, we don't need those. We're going to generate them ourselves. So let's have a look. Let's go to an environment where I'm more comfortable, the terminal. And where are we? Oh, there we go. Yes. So in the Strava API, what have I changed it? Oh, temp. Yes, get rid of temp. Rid of temp. What's my status? Oh God, I've changed loads of things. Oh, never mind. Let's have a look. We have got, this is what we're going to be using. I've got a little script here to make my Strava client ID and my Strava secret, which is this thing here. My ID is 21769, that's like the username, so it doesn't have to be protected. Client secret, I'm not going to press show here. I use a password store, you know, secure password store for all my things. So I've got my client ID and client secret in my password store. So when I source that, I can set the environment variables. In fact, let's do that now. Source env.sh, and of course to open the password store. And now I can say echo Strava, what was it called? Strava client ID. I can echo the ID because that's not secret. 21769. So that's that there, 21769. So I've got that. And the only other thing we're going to be using is this oauthflow-local. So let's have a look at that. Okay. This script, that's all you need, right? That's it. And we're going to go through it all. This will enable us to play with that whole flow. Okay, so what we're going to do is this program here effectively is going to simulate, in fact, what shall I do? I think I'll put that on this screen. There we go. There. Is that too big? Maybe I can make it a bit smaller so we can see more. Is that still okay? Yeah, there we go. There we go. Right, is that okay? Yeah, we'll do that. So this program here on the left, this script, is effectively my app. Okay. So let's go through it. Oh, tell you what, no, let's run it first, so you can sort of see what it does, and then we'll break it down. How about that? Okay. It's only sort of this week and this morning when I was thinking it's quite a challenge to sort of explain the authorization code grant type without showing something, without doing something. Let me know if this explanation is working for you, by the way, and if I'm missing something. But if I run, what's it called? oauthflow-local. The only difference between the local one and the ngrok is I'm using ngrok to expose, you know, a URL and expose a web endpoint on the interwebs, but I don't need one. oauthflow-local. Now, what that does is it gives me a URL. It generates a URL. We'll look at the details of this URL in a second, but this URL is effectively this bit here. Athlete clicks log into your app. So I just click, I'm starting my app up, and it's going to send me to this URL. I'm the athlete, redirected to the OAuth page. So look at this URL. It's a Strava URL, OAuth, Authorize. Remember in the previous two episodes of this little mini-series, we've recognized the /OAuth/token endpoint, which I sort of, generalized, hand-wavily said, that's like a well-known OAuth endpoint. It's an endpoint that is available on the authorization server here that you would normally go to say, please can I have an access token? Please can I have an access token? Or here's my refresh token, give me another access token, right? It's the token request, the access token request endpoint relative path. This one is another sort of well-known endpoint. And it's a well-known endpoint in the context of the authorization code grant type. And it's please can I have an authorization code, not an access token, an authorization code, the first step, this step. So we're going to go to a page. When I click on this in a minute, we're going to go to a page that is a Strava based page. And it's this thing here. What are we sending in that URL? We're sending a query string that contains the client ID 21769. There's my client ID 21769. Okay, it's me. And through that, Strava, the authorization server, can recognize that it's actually this API application. Okay, so it knows also to expect that the callback URL must be localhost 8000 something. Okay, if it's not, then and what is that callback URL? The redirect URI, callback URL, redirect URI, same thing, is, and this is, don't forget, because these are query string parameter values, they've got to be URL encoded. So that's just http :// %3a is : %2f is / URL encoded. http : / localhost %3a is a : 8000. Recognize that from anywhere? Yes, we do. That's localhost 8000 here, right? And then another parameter, of course, query strings, the parameter name value pair parameters are sort of joined together with the ampersand, right? We pass a scope, read all, comma, activity : read all, activity : write. Now, scopes are just, whatever they are, what they are. If we remember the scopes that were required for the core services for SAP BTP API package, the names of the scopes are a bit different, right? Scopes can be anything, banana, whatever, right? Usually, read or write or whatever. Interestingly enough, I think the Strava API changed over the years, and they sort of had a more granular way of defining scopes, which is why one of these scopes is like just a word, and another one of these scopes is like a word prefixed by something else to do with activities or clubs or athletes or whatever, right? And the response type, as in what we're asking for, is a code. Okay, that's part of the OAuth spec when we're doing an authorization code grant type request, right? So response type, please give me a code. And this approval prompt equals false. That's too boring to explain, and it's not really necessary. It's just, it's not just a Strava specific thing, so let's ignore that for now. Okay, basically I think if we've already authorized that, it will still be prompted again type thing, right? So are we ready to click on it? Are we ready to click on this link, right? Have we done this to death? I'm going to click on this link. And there we go. Now, let me make that full screen for a second so we can see. There's that URL. And let me just put that URL just to show you. Decode, decode, ooh, go away. Decode. There, look, see. Oh, did what? Oh, there it is. There. Redirect URI equals http://localhost 8000. Okay. Notice that by default, Strava is always going to assume that you need sort of the required scope, which is view data about your public profile. I think that's just read, not read all. Read all is view your private non-activity data, such as segments and routes. Read all activity, I can't remember which ones relate to which ones, right? But basically, we've got the 1, 2, 3. Read all, activity write. Okay, there, look, upload activities from test to Strava. Activity write, that's obviously that one. And these two are these two. I'm not going to uncheck any of these for now. I'm just going to, just not to complicate things. So now I'm going to authorize. Click authorize. Okay. Let me go back there. Click authorize. And something happened in the program because it received, the program was also listening on localhost 8000, right? Okay. The URL that the response from me pressing authorize got me as the web browser user to follow, to redirect to. I was as the human, as the athlete, was redirected to this URL. Normally, of course, it would be, you know, your app, your web app's URL, right? But the URL I was redirected to was localhost 8000, and I get given a state, nothing, there's no value for the state, don't even know what it is anyway. And I get given a code. Is that an access token? No, it's an authorization code, okay? So that, you know, we're not passing access tokens in the clear, as it were, okay? In URL get requests, you know, in URL query strings. That's a little bit sort of whoa, right? So we just pass a code, which has to be then exchanged for an access token along with, and the exchange will only happen as long as you provide your, as in the program's, client ID and client secret. So it's an extra level of protection. And we also get given the scopes that were granted by the human, by the athlete. I didn't uncheck anything. So we get told, oh yeah, you were given read, activity write, and activity read all, and also read all. So yeah, the default one, the one that was sort of like grayed out, it's like required, that's read. Okay. What happened over here? Let's go back here. Let's move that. Okay. And by the way, that's my super interesting response. Okay, response. Can't I add additional scopes? Oh, excuse me. Can't I'm assuming you're the human in this case. Mark is asking, can't I add additional scopes in between here that the resource owner did not send? No, because it's the authorization server that is receiving the original request with the original scopes, which was here. And it presents the form. And okay, if the authorization server was badly written, you could maybe figure out what the form looked like, what this what this form looked like here, and maybe guess at another parameter and send that parameter back. But a properly written authorization server in that context should say, hold on a minute, I've got given these name and value parameters back from the form. Actually, all I'm expecting, because that's all the client has requested, are these scopes here. Something's gone wrong. Okay. So there is a chance, at least, and I know I've not tested that, but I would assume that an organization like Strava or anything would say, well, okay, well, no, let's program against that. Does that make sense, Mark? So actually, while we're scrolled up here, let's see what happened. received. Okay, so this is the web server part of my script, receiving the call to http://localhost 8000, and it just looks at the URL. It just looks at the query string, get, and then you go to /, because that's always specified. The callback URL is going to be http://localhost 8000, no path. And then we get, we obviously, because we're the web server, we get access to the URL. We can pick apart the URL that was requested, which contains the code and contains the scope. Okay. Now, what do we do then? We then get the URL and make an HTTP request to that well-known token access request endpoint to say, please give me a token. Okay, so that token access request goes to the well-known /OAuth/token endpoint, which we've talked about just now and in the previous things. We send a form full of data, and as a response on the way back, because we've authenticated correctly, in fact, what was the authentication? Can we see it? Accept. Oh no, that was the initial request. What's going on? Post, user agent, accept content length. Let's have a look at the program name. What we get is some JSON response. And what do we get? We get some JSON. Okay. So let's have a look at what's happened. Does that make sense, by the way? Also, I'm just thinking now, should I invalidate that? No. So, tell you what I'll do is I'll go across to here. I'm thinking, if anybody's watching that shouldn't be, let me just generate a new client secret. Yes, there we go. Okay, good. So now, if anybody were to use the access token, they can't use it because, of course, and also, yeah, there we go, perfect. Actually, that's not true. Mind you, that, yeah, forget that, that's fine. So, what we do is we show the start URL, that's what we've done. In fact, let me run it again. oauthflow-local. Let's edit it in there. oauthflow-local, and then let's have that there. oauthflow-local. There's the start URL. Okay. John. Welcome, John Patterson. Can be set up to validate the scopes by introspection of the access token. That's a really good point. We did some introspection of the access token, didn't we, in the first episode of this little mini-series. I'm not sure that these access tokens are introspectable. Introspectable. Some sort of a 1980s song that's suddenly come to mind. Is it Salt and Pepper? I don't know. Robert, you may know. Sorry, that's completely put me off what we're talking about. Oh yeah, so John says, can be set up to validate scopes by introspection. Yes, you could, but these access tokens are quite short. They're only about 20 characters. And they're not JWT tokens. Maybe there's something else. Maybe there's another way of doing it. So yeah, that's a good point. So if we show the start URL, and then we run capture request, which basically sets up a little web server using ncat, because the simplest thing that could possibly work just listens on a port 8000. Okay, there's the port there, 8000, and the capture request starts listening on port 8000 and sends a response when something comes in, which is just HTTP 1.0 200 OK, and that is that OK there. Okay, so of course it has to listen for the incoming access code. Here's an access code redirect. Okay, Yes, exactly, Mark. That's what I was talking about. So the access token that we get in a BTP client credentials or a resource owner password credentials grant type is a huge thing. Remember, it's like almost filled the screen. And when we picked that apart, we realized it was a JWT token, and we could see all the different scopes and lots of other information. So that was done in, I think, in episode 1 of this little mini series, or episode 2. Mel and Kim, not Salt and Pepper, Mel and Kim. Good work, John. 1,000 points to John Paston there. I don't know whether it's good or bad that you recognise what that song was. Anyway, so capture request. Now, once we capture the request, right, we grab that in output, and let's just do it down there. But then we spit it out. We go and grab the output. We get the method get, we get the query, and we get the version of the HTTP protocol. We spit it out, and then we parse everything into an array. Okay. And then we use exchange token with the code. So effectively, this stuff here, let's not go into that now, we're not talking about bash scripting, but this stuff here is all about parsing what we get back. Let's go up here and just do that, and go up here, parsing what we get back, which was that, well, specifically that, as 3 things, white space separated. The method, the query string, and the protocol version. Okay, so that is the method, the query string, and the protocol version. Okay, in fact, let's go up there. Oops, received there. So that received colon something is exactly what that is. And then the query, echo query, parse query, there's the query. Okay, so the output of echo query is that. So that's the query that we parse. And what we're looking for is this. Okay. So parse query params, we parse that out, and then we have in query params code, we have the authorization code, and then we can make a request exchange token, which we're back to normal. We're back to a normal OAuth part of the flow. We say, I've got something, please give me an access token. And that something that I've got is the value of code, which is the code up here, right? But in order to get the access token, in order to be given the access token, I can't just give the code. I have to give my own credentials, as in my own, as in the program's own. I'm the program now. And the response from that is, in fact, I put it in, if you look here, I put it in, where is it? I tee it to a token data file. Now, what I'm going to do is, just go to secret for a second, remind me, vi token data, let's just do the refresh, let's change that. There we go, right, back to main. Whew. Okay, so now, so I just spit it out with JQ, which is that thing, where is it? There. That thing. But, let's have a look at it. And I've modified the access token, refresh token, so even if you have the client ID and client secret, you can use it. So we get token information. We get a refresh token, we get an access token, we get more information as well about me. Weight 79, is that right? I don't know, 79 kilos? I don't know. I mean, I put that in, I don't know whether I haven't got scales. So there we go. So that is effectively what I wanted to show you. Does that, I mean, all of a sudden, like, we're stopping. But that's it. Let's just go through what we've done. Okay. let's go through what we've done. Where are we? We've gone and said, where's the thing? Oh, there, right. We've clicked on the URL. We get taken to the Strava. Oh, let's do it. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Yeah, why not? Let's do it. Let's do it again. oauthflow-local. Let's do that again. Let's get rid of that. Don't need that. There. oauthflow-local. Oh, by the way, the reason these particular scopes are being requested is because, that's what I wanted. Let's do that again. Oops. Declare scope. Let's get rid of activity right, for example. Right? So now, in the scope query parameter, all we're asking for is read all and activity read all. Okay? Click on that. Hello? Click on that. Get taken there. So now notice that we don't get 3 green checkbox things. We get 2 because we're only being asked for, I as a human am only being asked to validate and say yes to read, which is that one, read all, read all. Let's do that as well. Let's unclick that and also activity read all. Right, one of those two. One of those is one's the other. If I click authorize, I get sent another code, and I also get sent the scope that the authorization was for. So we don't get the read all. We get the activity read all, but we don't get the one we don't get all of them that we're asking for. So as a program, I could say, sorry, dear athlete, you said no to this, but I really need this to do this thing for you on your behalf. So please, can I have it again? And what's going on? Oh yes, there we go. That's quite cool. Look what's happened. Look what's happened. Where is it? My brain's not working. Okay. There. Why have we got a 401? Why have we got 401? I forgot I did it until a second ago. We get 401 because I have changed my client secret. So the 401, everything worked apart from that, right? We got there, we got the information back. Let's do that. We get up there, we go up there, and we received a code, and we received the scope, read, and activity read all. Then we took that code and made a request to OAuth token saying, here's my client ID, here's my client secret, here's an authorization code, please give me an access token. And the response was, because of course, the client secret is now different. So the authorization in that request was not valid. Does that make sense? So Lewis said, some resources about how OAuth works in BTP. Okay, so there are some resources that we looked at in the previous episodes, but basically what you've got to do is, in fact, let's just go here. So if we say api.sap.com, core services BTP. For example, if you want to do that, you have to go to a specific, I want to use these, right? And then, account service or something, entitlement service. We've done that, haven't we, already? Then you look at the documentation, and it's there in the documentation that tells you how to generate a client ID and a client secret, as in a binding of what service instance, service and a plan, you need. There we go. Get any access token for SAP Cloud Management Service APIs. It's here. So you follow the route from the API, SAP API Business Hub to the documentation. Then you say, okay, well, okay, I need one of these, and that's it. And it does give you, some sample code. We've been through this before. This is how you request an access token, OAuth token, etc. So there are some resources. I would also recommend you have a look at this as well. That this generally, there we go. This generally has also links at the bottom to some parts of those bits of documentation. Okay, it's 9 o'clock. Was that okay? Let me know in the chat. Let me know in the chat whether that makes sense, whether you feel a little bit better about the authorization code grant type. Yeah, let me know. Let me know. But apart from that, have a great Friday, have a great weekend. I'm not sure what we're going to be doing next week. We'll do something random. But until then, bye and see you soon.